Shalom, salam. Greetings, brethren and sister. Welcome to Slothman Speaks. In the last segment, we spoke of the Ten Commandments, the New Covenant, the true gospel faith, the true gospel light. As we go forward into the book of Romans, New Testament, and the New Covenant, we deal with the gospel light and the particular letter written to Romans by the Apostle Paulus, or as we know of the Apostle Paul. In chapter 3, starting at verse 21, it speaks of righteousness through faith. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of Yahweh has been disclosed and is attested by the law and the prophets, the righteousness of Jah through faith in Yeshua, Jesus Christ, for all who believe. There is no distinction, since all have sinned and fall short of the glory of Yahweh. They are now justified by His grace as a gift, through the redemption that is in the Messiah, Yeshua, from Yahweh, put forward as a sacrifice of atonement by His blood, effective through faith. He did this to show His righteousness, because in His divine forbearance He had passed over, keyword, pass over, or Pesach, passed over the sins previously committed. It was to prove at the present time that He Himself is righteous, that He justifies the one who has faith in Yehoshua. Then what becomes of boasting? It is excluded by what law? By that of works? No, but by the law of faith. For we hold that a person is justified by faith apart from works prescribed by the law. Or is Yahweh Jah the God Elohim of Jews only? Is He not the God Elohim of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, since Jah is one. Remember the Shema prayer, Yahweh is one. And He will justify the circumcised on the ground of faith and the uncircumcised through that same faith. Do we then overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. If we move on to chapter 4, it speaks of the example of Abraham in reflection to the book of Genesis and the Torah, Genesis chapter 17, verse 10. But continuing in Romans chapter 4, Romans chapter 4, what then are we to say was gained by Abraham, our ancestor, according to the flesh? Remember, the Apostle Paulus, or the Apostle Paul himself being, a Jew or an Israelite, that messianic, born again, faithful Israelite, speaking to his people, and speaking to both Israelites, Jews, and Gentiles alike. What then are we to say was gained by Abraham, our ancestor, according to the flesh? For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before Yahweh. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed Yahweh, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. Now to one who works, wages are not reckoned as a gift, but as something due. But to one who without works trusts Him who justifies the ungodly, such faith is reckoned as righteousness. So also David, speaking of King David, so also David speaks of the blessedness of those whom Yahweh Jah reckons righteousness apart from works. In verse 7, blessed are those whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one against whom the Lord Yahweh will not reckon sin. Verse 9, is this blessedness then pronounced only on the circumcised, or also in the uncircumcised? We say faith was reckoned to Abraham as righteousness. How then was it reckoned to him? Was it before or after he had been circumcised? It was not after, but before he was circumcised. He received the sign of circumcision as a seal of the righteousness that he had by faith while he was still uncircumcised. The purpose was to make him the ancestor of all who believe without being circumcised, and who thus have righteousness reckoned to them. And likewise, the ancestor of the circumcised, who are not only circumcised, but who also follow the example of the faith that our ancestor Abraham had before he was circumcised.